Welcome to Film Strip. These podcasts are spoiler-filled as we discuss the plots, characters, and themes of the films in review. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504(c)(2), Title 17.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Ron.
I'm Lindsey.
I'm Kurt.
And I'm Jay.
And we are here to talk about Starship Troopers, starring Casper Van Dien, Dina Meyer, Denise Richards, Neil Patrick Harris, Jake Busey's Teeth, Patrick Muldoon, Michael Ironside, and Clancy Brown, based on a novel by Robert Heinlein and adapted by Edward Neumeier, directed by the brilliant satirist, he's so good at it, no one knows it's satire, Paul Verhoeven, released in 1997, where it received some critical backlash from idiots who didn't get it. It has since been reappraised and definitely has a following, at least among one of the Film Strip cast members. That would, of course, be me. Because I'm not driving this Titanic for fun. I'm driving it to sink the bitch. And much like the Roger Young being hit by a giant bug asteroid, I'm ready to burst into flames at any moment. This movie is one of my all-time favorite movies. My wife hates it. That is not why it is one of my all-time favorite movies. That's just a coincidence. It's one of those movies where when it's on, Holly would be like, "You're not watching this again, are you? You just watched it like last week." And it'd be like, "Yes, I'm watching it again because it's on." If I wasn't supposed to be watching it, I wouldn't have stumbled across it on HBO. Like they're literally airing this for me right now. Did I see it in the theaters? I don't think so. But I have seen it a billion times on home video. I went to the Riff Tracks Live. They did a Riff Tracks Live version of it, which was absolutely brutal to Denise Richards, and they apologized to her in advance before they started on all those jokes. And Casper Van Dien too, for that matter. They were apologetic to everyone involved because they know that they were getting their directions from a maniac named Paul Verhoeven. So this is one of my absolute all-time favorite movies. I've been pushing to talk about it on the show for, I don't know, however long, 10 years, Jay?
Yeah, at least, yeah.
Yeah, and it's always been like, hey, can we do Starship Troopers? Like, no, we're doing good movies now. Or, no, we're doing
When have we
crap.
ever said that?
I don't know. Probably when you're doing Stanley Kubrick shit with Kurt.
The one time we got classy. But
and even then, some of those Stanley Kubrick movies are just as trashy.
No, I offer you eyes wide shut, sir.
But that is my background on this movie. Lindsey, what is yours?
I saw this movie a handful of times. I liked it. I haven't seen it since, God, probably very shortly after it was released. But I'd go, I don't know, I'd go 2000 was probably the last time I saw it. So I didn't remember much about it. I led for God knows the number of times my husband astray when I gave him the plot summary of it. I mistakenly gave him the plot summary of Galaxy Quest instead, so we started watching it.
What a hell of a mix-up.
Wow.
We started watching it, and I was like, oh, this isn't the movie that I told you it was. I'm so sorry. I mixed that up. I said, it'll still be good, though. It'll still be good.
I can see Brian's face right now.
But
before you go on, Lindsey, is Brian bug phobic in any way?
No.
Okay, good, because that would have been a disaster.
Though I did forget how it was. I forgot. How do I put this? I forgot how gross it was at the beginning, and we were eating dinner while we were watching it.
Oh, nice.
So that, I mean, we weren't eating like anything slimy, so it was okay. But yeah, so I watched it. It was probably on TNT or something like that when, and highly edited version of it. And then we had it on VHS and rented it a couple times as well. So I have a little bit of background with it. Didn't remember what much, but was happy to go back and revisit it.
So the dinner of escargot and chapelinas went well.
Yeah, it did. It was so good.
Kurt, what about you? What's your backstory of this bad boy?
Well, I would have seen this probably right when it hit VHS, and I would have been about 9 years old. My dad would have thrown this on. He was a certainly at the time big Paul Verhoeven fan. Whether it was a fan of him or just he's definitely a fan of his work with RoboCop and Total Recall. So Starship Troopers was probably that would have been my first Paul Verhoeven movie. And I enjoyed Starship Troopers at the time, and just thought it was a fun movie and everything. And then as I get older and watch RoboCop and Total Recall, I kind of go back and realize that Starship Troopers is absolutely just of the same ilk. It's that same flavor that only Paul Verhoeven brings to sci-fi action movies, which he gives you the sci-fi action movie, he gives you what you want, and he will slip something else in there. Whether you and it's this weird thing, whether it's like he gives you these messages and emotions and stuff that you can completely disregard and ignore and still have fun with it. But if you want to see those things and pay attention to them, the movies become that much better.
Very true. And I would say that he doesn't slip them in so much as he bludgeons you over the head with them. And
Yeah.
Maybe you remember them. Maybe they give you such brain damage that they go completely unnoticed. But Jay, what do you think about Starship Troopers, bud?
I saw this in theaters when it came out. I was a junior year of college and had a couple of friends who had read the book and said, "Oh yeah, man, you got to see this," because they knew I was a big RoboCop fan and I was a big Total Recall fan. And so one saw this on the big screen in the little town I was in college, and thought, okay, cool, about what I expected. Felt like I didn't know at the time that the guy who wrote this, Edward Neumeier, who had adapted it, also was one of the co-writers of RoboCop, and that explained a lot down the line. Because I was like, there feels like a definite thread, particularly with like the news intercuts and all that stuff between them, and sort of the ultra violence and kind of the wacky way it was. But I didn't think anything else about it until years later. And a friend of mine in the one of the towns I was working in was an ex-military guy, had read the book and was like, "Oh, you got to read the book and then watch the movie. It's a totally different experience." So I did. I read the book and was like, "Man, I don't remember this at all. Where's the shower scene with Dina Meyer? Like, what's going on here?" And then watched the movie again with him on, like, we rented it or whatever, and I was like, "That's a completely different experience, like total adaptation, if it were." And yeah, I hadn't thought about it much since. I mean, I caught pieces of it here and there on cable through the years and stuff, but wasn't something I hated. I mean, I liked it. I thought it was fun, but I didn't give it a whole lot of deep thought or anything like that. And I remembered the book being, again, more like the diary of a soldier on the front lines of an intergalactic war or something. And then I reread it for this podcast. I wanted to go back and revisit the source material. And what's funny of it is how much of the stuff from the book is still in this movie, but not in like the same order or even the same context. But it's just like, let's just take ideas and just stick it back in there, and then have all this RoboCop sort of sensibility about, social awareness and parody, and then the Paul Verhovenness of all of it, kind of stuck in there. And what stuck me this time around was like all the other characters in this movie that have like lines and are part of the story are like mere afterthoughts in the book. Like, I think Dizzy Flores has one line and he dies. It's a he in the book, and like that's it, And Carmen Ibanez is not in a love interest, which I adapted to because I once owned an Ibanez guitar known as the toneless wonder of guitars, and so I related to it on that level. But no, this movie is one that I've just known and I felt like I knew well, but it'd been a year since I rewatched it total. So reading the book and then firing this bad boy up on a Sunday morning was an interesting experience, no doubt, to go back and revisit. And my wife watched it with me, kind of like Lindsay, your husband did with you. And I don't think she had ever seen this before. And she was sort of like, "Ooh, this is like gross, but also kind of weird." And
Brian had definitely never seen it before.
yeah, I don't think
This was
Rachel
the
had ever
first time.
experienced the Starship
Yeah.
Troopers. And she's like, "This is based on a book." I said, "In the loosest sense of the term." That's what I can tell you. Like, they share a title and a couple of characters, and that's it. And sort of some bullet points, but if you took all the bullet points and just reversed them. But yeah, I've seen this before, but Ron, like I say, you and I have talked about how can we fit this one in somewhere along the way, and finally, after we we broke the ice on Minority Report. It was time to break the ice on Starship Troopers as well. I have a question though for the room before we get any forward. I've never seen any of them. Anybody seen any of the sequels they made of this thing? Because I understand there are sequel books, which I haven't read, but there are also sequel movies, some of which involve Casper Van Dien.
I have not seen a one.
No.
I haven't either.
I haven't either, but I've really, after having rewatched it, I'm thinking I should just go back and check those out, and maybe we should just do a whole revive the film strip tradition of watching all of the offshoot
Oh.
movies of the thing.
I'm going to say no on that, but just by the look of them. But I don't know. Maybe there's a fun one buried in there somewhere. I think it's like 3 of them actually. But
There's like 5.
oh my gosh! See, yeah, I had no idea. But yeah, this one's one of those that I think once you see it, there are things about it that you'll never forget, you know? But there's also a lot of stuff like rewatching it this time. There's a lot of stuff that I was like, oh, I forgot about that. I forgot they did that. I forgot Doogie Howser was like a psychic, in this or whatever and all that kind of stuff. So, because I know him as Doogie Howser, modern generation knows him as Barney from, How I Met Your Mother. So, however you do it.
But yeah, Jay, there's 4 movies and an animated TV series from 1999, apparently.
Goodness
because
gracious.
even by 1999, they hadn't learned their lesson and were still trying to turn Paul Verhoeven things into cartoons. If anyone else remembers RoboCop, the animated series, other than me,
I do. Yes.
I know you do, Jay.
Yeah, of course I do.
That's the 2 oldest people on this podcast. We should remember these kind of things.
Well, I grew up in the generation where we made war propaganda as Saturday morning cartoons. I mean, come on, G.I.
Are you
Joe.
talking about the Rambo cartoon?
Well, Rambo, G.I. Joe,
G.I. Joe.
Transformers, GoBots, you name it, kid.
Yeah,
I had it
100%.
all.
And I also remember being super excited and watching the Canadian RoboCop television series on syndication, Kurt.
Dead or alive, you're coming with me, eh?
You're welcome.
Another great gift that Canada has given us.
I just want to go back for a minute though, because Kurt, like dad of the year to your dad, by the way, you watched this when you were 9.
Yeah, but look, it's definitely a movie. I look back, it's like every time I watch, I'm like, I can't believe you let us watch this. It's like even just the guy who gets shot in the training exercise, like that is graphic. That's just one out of 50,000 little things that aren't suitable for kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My dad was the same way. I watched so many things I shouldn't have never watched and so he'd make me close my eyes for certain parts, but just Full Metal Jacket, that was one of them. I don't remember how old I was when I first saw it, but I was way too young.
Wow. Yeah. You're Arlie Ermy spewing out that 20 minutes of profanity.
Oh, that was fine. That was fine. He always made us close our eyes during the scene, the suicide scene.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
The rest of it was totally fine, but that was the one scene.
Yeah.
He was like,
there's nothing wrong with Animal Mother
this.
shooting a woman point blank, but God forbid Vincent D'Onofrio take out Arlie Ermy.
Man, it was different. Times were different.
Times were. I think we were all bonded by the fact that our parents let us watch this shit when we should.
They were like, "You're old enough, and you'll be fine. You're well adjusted."
Yeah, we all turned out okay.
Funnily enough, the first R-rated movie I remember seeing in movie theaters was RoboCop 2.
Okay,
so 100%.
Mine was Terminator 2. So back when they didn't card you. So.
I think I saw RoboCop 2 before I saw Terminator 2, but I definitely saw both of them in the theaters.
Wow.
I don't remember my first R-rated movie.
But I presume my parents were like, "Oh, there's no boobs in this. It's okay." And meanwhile, RoboCop shoots 50 people in the face or whatever, and a child sells drugs.
Oh yeah, nuke all the drugs, all the blood, but no naked women. Yeah, can't do that.
No.
That's what it's like growing up in America, kids.
Apparently, that's what it's like growing up in Canada too. I don't know.
Little bit.
Yeah.
Guns, yes. Boobs, no.
But hey, speaking of growing up in America, Jay, why don't you tell us about the fascist military state that is the government of Starship Troopers, and not the fascist military state that is the government of the United States?
All right, look. Well, in the self-interest of our group here, I'm going to just go through the plot summary, but occasionally I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to need you to respond in the affirmative if you wish for me to go forward. So I'll keep that in mind. So we start with Johnny Rico, and his high school pals, right? And they're all bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, ready to join the military and earn their citizenship in this utopia or dystopia where service guarantees you a vote, because apparently votes matter in this future. And therefore, their training montage is a whirlwind of tough instructors and live fire exercises and camaraderie forced in the face of extreme hardship. And, we see all kinds of people that he gets to meet. He plays sports and some sort of random version of football that I don't think really exists, but maybe it does in the spring. It's kind of the Rocks League, something like that. He's chasing after the hotshot, soon to be nuclear scientist woman who doesn't want anything to do with him. So he's got that in common with James Bond. While the cute redhead who's head over heels for him, that he totally ignores. So he's got that in common with like every John Cusack 80s movie ever going on. And he's ignoring all of this shit. Right. But he joins the military because, he goes against his parents' wishes. He wants to do this. And oh, by the way, his buddy Carl's also like a psychic or something, because why not have supernatural elements in this thing? And they're all doing this because we're at a war with a bug planet. But what does the bug planet want? What do they do? Who knows? Do you want to know more?
Of course
Yes.
we do. Yes.
Well, see, things take a turn for the worse, though, when the giant space bugs decide to crash an asteroid into Buenos Aires. Because it turns out these arachnids aren't too keen on like sharing the galaxy or the imperialist notion of whatever world we're living in now. Rico's parents get turned into salsa or dust, and then suddenly the whole join the military thing gets a lot less fun and a lot more personal. This military, in a display of tactical brilliance, and by brilliance I mean complete suicidal empathy, decides to throw a first wave of fresh-faced recruits at the bugs on their home turf, and it goes about as well as expected. Would you like to know more?
Yes.
Rico, against all odds and any semblance of self-preservation, manages to not only get bug stomped, but he bounces around the ranks, goes through a back to tank, gets his leg healed, gets a taste of leadership, screws up, and then somehow claws his way back into the thing. He's like Forrest Gump of the mobile infantry, but somehow less dumb, and he didn't play for Alabama. And more explosions and fewer boxes of chocolates. Oh, and he also finally hooks up with Dizzy, who, let's be honest, was way more into him than Carmen ever was, and was way better for him. Would you like to know more?
Yes.
Yes.
It even gets weirder, though, because it turns out these bugs aren't just giant, hissing, leg-having monsters. They have a brain one called the brain bug that apparently is the key to the whole operation. And in the move that can only be described as bold or maybe just insane, Rico and his crew capture this brain bug. And the shocking revelation, the brain bug's scared. All the bugs stomping, it turns out they're just big softies at heart. So the movie wraps up with humanity celebrating this quote victory. Even though the bug war is far from over, we get treated to some good old-fashioned propaganda reminding us that service guarantees citizenship. Rico's all pumped up for the next round of bug killing, but let's not forget the casualties along the way. Rico's parents vaporized in Buenos Aires, his tough as nails instructor, Ratchet brutally maimed and euthanized, the spunky Dizzy impaled by a tragic ambush, and then of course there's Xander, who kind of stole Carmen away from him, but she was never really his to lose anyway, but he got his brain sucked out by the brain bug. Very weird. In a gloriously over-the-top, satirical, surprisingly gory spectacle that ends with the promise of more bug battles to come. And if you want to know more, read the damn book or watch the sequels. I don't know.
I don't know if there's much more we need to know after that, Jay. That was a pretty good plot summary.
I tried my best. I had to go back to my journalism days of writing propaganda for the state to be able to put that together.
So, speaking of propaganda for the state, the first few military people we see in this movie, the first few citizens we see, are all like horribly mangled. So you've got the science teacher, Mr. Ratchak, before he becomes Lieutenant Ratchak, Ratchak's Roughnecks. And then you get a blind Rue McClanahan, and they don't talk about how she lost her eyesight. They just establish that she is blind and she has some sort of Geordi LaForge device on her head. Neither of these people paint a very positive view of like life as a member of the military or the civilian life that comes to you after you've been in the military. Because like, you're telling me the best you can do as a veteran who has lost body parts for the United Citizen Federation is to teach high school. Like, you could probably teach high school without losing your eyesight and suffer just as much. Like, that should be one of your choices. Like, do you want to be in the mobile infantry? Do you want to be a psychic? Do you want to be a pilot? Or do you want to do Dangerous Minds in Buenos Aires High School? Like, you know what? Just let the boat shoot at me. Infantry all day long.
What's wild, man, is this is in the book. I didn't realize this, but like when Carl and Johnny, who are like really close friends, and it's more established in the book, go to sign up together, like the recruiter, who's not really named, is like got no legs and no arms, and he's at the front, like, "Are you sure?" And they're like, "Hell yeah, sign me up." And I was like, "Well, that I mean, I've heard of that kind of thing before, like doing the whole Gestalt therapy version of recruiting people, but I don't know. It was wild that they kept that around in this, as it were. And Reshak was like the civics teacher for they make a big deal in the book how the grade doesn't count, but you have to take the class anyway. And I was like, that's bogus. They don't do that shit till you in college when you pay for it.
Yeah, I don't know. I remember taking a lot of classes where I was going to be guaranteed at least a C just for showing up and not throwing things at the teacher. So that's not a terrible surprise, and not necessarily a positive statement about the public education system on any planet. But it's established that Rico clearly comes from money because we see his house and it's insane. And I assume that, Carl looks to be a little more middle class, but he's on an officer track because he's going to be in the psychic corps. I saw somebody posed a question. I don't know if it was on the Action for Everyone Discord or it was on the internet somewhere, but someone asked the question, is Carl actually psychic? What do you think?
I like to think that he probably that he is, although I never thought that I never questioned it before.
Well, the only thing that made me question it was the very end of the movie when he goes, "It's scared," and any non-psychic, I feel like, could glean that information.
The bug is shaking and quivering as people have guns pointed at it. But I think the other thing, though, too, is Rico says, like, he's the one that told me where to find Carmen after she had gotten captured with Patrick Muldoon. And through, like, I don't know, Force Ghost whispering, I guess before we got to The Last Jedi, Brian Johnson ripped that shit off of Starship Troopers.
Like, all we've seen of Carl, psychic-wise, is he gets a ferret to go harass his mom. Like, I've seen Beastmaster, and I've known people who have had ferrets. You don't really need to do that much work to get a ferret to harass someone.
Not hard to get to get.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. He does make a comment, I guess, in the beginning where he can't do it to humans. It only really works. His psychic abilities only really work with animals. But he was also really good at science too, right? Or is that in the book? Jay, I started reading the book at
it's both.
But okay. Yeah. But I have it. I didn't finish it. So
yeah, it's
and let's not kid ourselves. Would it be that hard to convince Johnny Rico that you're a psychic? I don't think so.
Definitely not.
No.
Johnny Rico, who, as I texted Ron and Lindsey, in another century was just a slot wide receiver for the New England Patriots when Tom Brady was quarterback.
No, he has a football background. If he was like playing space lacrosse or something, then Belichick would make him a slot receiver.
If he was playing space lacrosse, he would be on the Duke documentary for all the wrong reasons. He would have been at that party. There's no doubt about it. Now, the thing about this, that I think, and the biggest stark difference between the book and this movie, like I hinted at early, was that most of the characters outside of Carl that we see in this movie, that their names are from the book, get a line, maybe a paragraph. The whole book is Johnny Rico, and it's kind of it's from his point of view completely. It's like a war diary of Johnny Rico, so it's all about Johnny Rico, who is a very different person. He's a Filipino short guy in the book, and here he's like the whitest California dude you could find in Buenos Aires, of all places,
with an impossibly square jaw.
Right?
Really, that actor just a really square face.
I
Chiseled
feel I
features.
feel like his family are from the line of people in Buenos Aires that came over about 1945.
Well, I always took it that actually, well, it was more recently, I guess. It was as the more I watch it, the more I pick up on things like the fascist elements and this was the first time I really paid attention to Rodchek's lesson at the start of the movie, and he just throws it away. They don't really mention it again for the rest of the movie. How they talk about how the veterans took over the world basically. And it just there's such a casual way of just saying the world is being run by a fascist military regime. And because I did always think watching the movie right away, even as the first time I saw it, I'm like, well, why are they in South America and everyone's American? And it's like I didn't understand that. And watching it now, I'm thinking we're obviously centuries in the future. That I get the impression that America, the American military, conquered the entire planet, and we just happen to be starting our story with that all of the world has basically become American as a result of this military takeover, and these we just happen to be following the Americans in South America.
Kurt, as you were starting that, I was really tempted to lean into the mic and start humming the Star Spangled Banner because that just was a perfect lead in. Yeah, I feel like there's something to be said about the United Citizen Federation taking the United from the United States and kind of running with that. Especially because, as we see, there are people playing five-a-side football or seven-a-side football in Buenos Aires. Like there's some, like I think they're a small Texas high school.
Yeah,
yeah. It's like 7-on-7 survived, but we've got inter squad too, because like Dizzy's the quarterback, and you got, I mean, a lot of things are more modern through this. But what's wild is like if you look at the way that they do, I don't know if you guys remember arena football. But this is
Of
very
course I
much
do.
arena football. And this was the heyday of when that was starting. And I've seen a few arena games. Ron, I saw the Pillsbury Throwboy in an arena game.
Yes, you did.
But I was like, this is very arena football. Like, this is wild. But of course, like Johnny Rico's like a jock. Like that's his whole persona in this movie.
For
Even though that's
those
not
that
really the
don't
way he's in the
know,
book. But yeah.
for those that don't know, before Jay gets too far, the Pillsbury Throwboy is former University of Kentucky quarterback, 300-pound left-handed quarterback Jared Lorenzen.
Super Bowl champion,
Super
Jared
Bowl champion
Lorenzen.
Jared Lorenzen.
Rest in peace, by the way.
The most unstoppable quarterback sneak you've ever seen. It was like watching people try to tackle a polar bear. It was amazing.
I saw him play live in person, not only that arena game, but at Kentucky once too, by the way. So I've seen it all in person.
And we did have an AFL2 franchise here that I saw play several times. And that was awesome. It's a very entertaining brand of football. But what was funny though, each season, like players would leave the AFL2 team that we had, the Louisville Fire, because they got jobs in the CFL. So it was like,
They
okay, so
upgraded.
that's, I guess, the level of football we're talking about.
Like if you know the difference in American football and CFL and you want to put them together, that's the AFL, and the AFL2 is the knockoff version of all of that. But it all fits this high school like whole thing because and this is long said, and I think I read somewhere that Verhoeven used the sports metaphor because he felt like American sports, in particular football, had very much like a core in like military stuff, like the way it was organized and the way you talked about it and everything. And I thought that is exactly the way that I would expect a European to interpret American football. And it fits. I mean, it kind of works. It's a way to introduce everybody. I mean, if we're not going to do a wedding like The Godfather, why not have a football scene?
Yeah.
That's
It's not
definitely,
far off.
yeah, you're not wrong. There's definitely something there. And I feel like someone who is an outsider to American culture, like Paul Verhoeven, would be the guy to put the thumb on it so directly, right?
It's also just easy plot setup because you see how many times Dizzy saves Johnny's ass. Sometimes literally, but in this movie, multiple ways because she clearly has the brains to do it, but is never going to get advanced. So unfortunately, we haven't advanced culture far enough. Like she can play quarterback, but she can't be the squad leader, and stuff like that. But we're introducing everybody in this moment. Like we have ultimately what will be Carmen's love interest slash mentor on the other team, who Patrick Muldoon looked at least 35 in high school at this
100%.
point. Yeah. And then you've got Carmen, you have Carl, who's the nerd friend everybody has hanging out, and then you have Johnny and Dizzy on the field. And it's all just to introduce them. And we've had Ratchek in the classroom. We meet all these people, and it's just a way to kind of get all this through. What I was blown away was with like some things still survived, like prom was still a thing in the future, and it was like an elaborate prom. I don't know about y'all, my prom was like in a Ramada Inn. It wasn't that nice, but that was an elaborate ass prom scene.
Just imagining all these 17-year-olds wearing nice suits at a Ramada Inn.
Yeah, or just imagine all these 35-year-olds pretending to be 17 at the Ramada Inn, Lindsay.
Yeah, even better.
Yeah.
My favorite factoid about this whole movie is that Paul Verhoeven tried and then gave up on reading the original book because it was too boring for him.
He couldn't make it through. I can't believe that. I think Edward Nearby read it though. Like he clearly did, because he just cherry picked stuff out of it that he wanted to do.
Yeah, I think he did, but I think Verhoeven didn't. And I feel like the movie skews heavily towards like Paul Verhoeven's sensibilities, which is one of the things why I think we have these 25-year-old high school students. I think he wanted everyone to watch it and feel like, oh, these people are crazy for believing this shit. What's wrong with them? They're all like middle-aged adults. They should know better.
Well, what like there's obviously time jumps in this, and only a few times do they call out how long anything's been. Like, how long do y'all think this takes place over? Like in my head, I'm like, this is at least 5 or 6 years of these people's lives.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna go more than really 3 or 4, but it's a handful of years for sure. It was hard to follow, and until like the end, well, not the end, but when they have a fresh thing, like a fresh class of recruits, and they're all analyzing them, and they look so much older, and I was like, you guys are like 22, maybe. Look at these youngsters. You're 3 years older than them. But I have no idea how long it actually went. I don't know if you guys do.
Well, I took it as it being like they say the training took a year, and I took it as like the campaign that we see was only a few weeks, and I felt that as being deliberate as part of the propaganda angle, the propaganda satire of the movie, the idea of if this were a propaganda movie, the idea of some young, easily swindled person saying, I can be in the military for only like, a couple of weeks, and all of a sudden I'll be an officer, like I'll be a colonel, like the, what's his name? Neil Patrick Harris looking like the youngest colonel in war movie history. Yes. And I don't know how deliberate that is. The idea of all these super young people, like Denise Richards is like, meant to be like 17 years old, and she's like flying a Star Cruiser across the galaxy. So I don't know if that was a deliberate choice or not, but that I think that's part of that 90210 vibe of the first act and a lot of the movie. Again, I think that is part of the propaganda angle. This idea of these rich, beautiful people giving a shit about being in the military. Like I've seen so many war movies, and that is a first. Like it's not dirt poor kids in Texas who, want to follow the family tradition. It's like Casper Van Diemen's living in a $5 million home in South America. He's got a free ticket to Harvard or whatever. It's like he absolutely does not need to join the military. But again, the propaganda angle is, is the drive. It's his duty. He should want to do it. And yeah.
Well, I mean, he's thinking about it because his friends are doing it, but he gets called out on it. He does it because he's chasing after Carmen.
He's the only friend who's doing it. The only two people who are doing it are Carmen and Carl. And we don't know either of their. Well, we know Carl's, and it's just kind of like a middle class-ish house. We don't know anything about Carmen's life.
Yeah.
Dizzy turns down an NFL professional football contract to to be in the military. So think about that for a second. Like, she took the Pat Tillman route,
Yeah.
except not friendly fire. But
Yeah.
she gave up millions of dollars, presumably, to do this. Which, let's consider that for a minute. What about a world where you can start at quarterback for the Sao Paulo Gunslingers or whatever and make millions of dollars and not have to leave South America?
Yeah, right. I thought it was interesting that, I mean, she's the one that calls Rico out on it too. In the shower scene, which I want to talk about the infamous shower scene for a minute here, right? Okay, because it's one of the memorable things of this, and I want to give Verhoeven credit for this. How can I shoot something that, like, people that don't understand what's going on will like find this like, ooh, alluring or whatever, but really it's like the unsexiest thing ever. Like, it's completely benign because they're basically like taking like a Facebook quiz in the shower together. Why did you join? Why did you join? And you almost pay no attention to the fact that it's just co-ed, everybody's just doing their thing or whatever. And the best part again is, and it's all in Dina Meyer's face, and she's like, "Oh, Johnny, he came here for a girl." And then when he walks away, they're like, "Was it you?" And she's like, "I don't know, maybe." But I took that, Ron, as like, did she follow him into the military?
She did.
I think
I'm pretty
so.
sure she followed him into the military. But my favorite part about that is that, imagine all these actors are naked in front of the camera, and who's naked behind the camera?
Paul Verhoeven.
Paul Verhoeven and the camera guy.
Andrew, yeah.
Yeah. They were like,
Hey,
well, it's so
look,
important for us to be naked. Why don't you do it? And Paul Verhoeven starts taking his clothes off, and everyone's probably immediately horrified that this, 60-plus-year-old World War II survivor is like, sure, I would take my pants off.
I want to tell you who else would do that. Tony Scott would have done that. And I know for a fact Rick Rosenthal did that in Halloween 2 for the lady that was in the hot tub drowning scene. She was really nervous about it, so he said, "Fine." So he stripped down too, just for her. And she asked him, "Please put your clothes back on."
Neither one of those things is a huge surprise, especially the Rick Rosenthal thing. He's a friggin' maniac.
He is a maniac. He's a complete maniac. But I credit that the scene though for that though, because again, in another director's hands, that could be something that's supposed to be like, ooh, alluring and all this again, but it's not. It's not played for that at all. And that's what makes it kind of genius in a way, is that we have evolved enough as a society to where that doesn't matter anymore. We're all just in the same shower together because we're all doing the same stupid war bullshit anyway, because we're still believing the same lie. That's what's amazing about it.
Yeah, it's very much a European ideal. So
Yeah,
I wonder,
we're all so equal on such equal ground that we can literally be naked in front of all different types, colors, sexes. It doesn't matter. Nobody gives a shit. We're all so focused on, being a citizen.
Well, and
or whatever the task at hand. Yeah, that you just
you're all there to like soak up arachnid stingers or whatever. You're not there to like do anything great. You're literally infantry grunts.
And a lot of military movies after this have tried to do this, something kind of G.I. Jane with Demi Moore had not exactly the same scene, but there were a few moments in there that, I think maybe tried to have a similar effect. And I liked this one. I thought this one worked really well.
Well, and you get and it's a thing that happens a lot in sci-fi dystopia movies, the idea of like the unisex shower. Because Jay, you'll know this from Robot Jocks.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a unisex shower scene in there. It pops up quite a bit in these, like, we have advanced far beyond the mores of privacy or whatever. I assume because they're all living in like, every one of these movies takes place in some sort of like fascist surveillance state where it's like, what does it matter if you're naked in front of your squad mates? The government's got miles of reels of you naked throughout your life.
Well,
yeah, that's a
James
good point.
Cameron does a little bit of this in when they wake up on the Sulaco in Aliens. They're all together. Like
Oh yeah,
they're
yeah, that's a good one.
dressed more or less, but not really. And like, but nobody gives a shit. Like they're just like, whatever. My feet are cold, Sarge. I mean, that's all they're thinking about is and two movies that have a bug hunt in common, as it were. So, and go about as well when they attack. By the way, the Colonial Marines and the Mobile Infantry, you suck. That's what I would like to say to both of you.
But honestly, even as a viewer, I mean, when the scene first starts, I, le- I'm a female, and even one of my first thoughts was, "Oh, boobs." And as the scene progressed, I just didn't. It didn't matter because they were all just having a very normal conversation, and you just kind of forget that everybody's naked.
I do love
I
the
think it's
continuity fact that they did keep Jake Busey's hand in a cast because after Clancy Brown threw a fucking knife through it, which it should have happened in the Divergent movie. I want to say, by the way, Shailene Woodley should have had one right in the forehead. But anyway, I digress. But I love that they kept that in continuity. That he can only work with one hand as he's washing off his chest.
well, I think it is a good scene. I think probably the first 2, 3, 12 times I saw that scene, I'm just focused on the nudity maybe, but it was like watching it this last time. Certainly, it was like he gives you this this TNA scene, and then it wasn't until like recently really paying attention to the dialogue. It's like they're really. It's some really twisted stuff. Like everyone's talking about
Yeah.
why they're joining. Like that one woman who says, "Well, I want to have babies, so and you need citizenship to get the license." And I'm like, "Well, that's like there's a whole movie
What?
right there."
Yeah. Or like
Like,
it's easier to get a license if you're a citizen,
Yeah.
which is crazy. That is some dystopian,
yeah,
like the
Yeah,
giver
it's
shit.
harkens back to in the archives, Shay, Fortress, the
Yes.
Christopher Lambert, Kurtwood Smith future prison movie where he
Yes.
goes to jail because he and his wife had a baby that wasn't licensed by the government.
Yep.
So, and
Well,
speaking of shower scenes.
yeah, we're talking about this though. Verhoeven did this in RoboCop. The cops are all changing in a co-ed
oh
locker room,
yeah.
and nobody gives a damn because they're all getting shot in Detroit. I mean, that's what they're worried about is not getting killed. But you're right though, Liz. Like everybody and Kurt, everybody has such a different name. I got into Harvard, but you know what? I can get it paid for if I do a couple of years in the
Mhm.
military. So okay, there's that. I want to have kids. There's that. I want to go into politics, and you got to be a citizen to do that. So there's that. I'm going full on. Oh, I love Jake Busey and his huge teeth that he inherited from his dad. And all that personality. Like, yeah, I'm going full on all the way. And then Johnny, well, who made you so fucking nosy? And that's when like, oh yeah, he's not here for any reason other than something else. But I mean, that's what's wild. All the reasons people would do things are the most normal things that we just take for granted,
Mhm.
right? But in this world, like, no, you got to be like licensed for it. You can't do anything on your own. But yet they don't act like they're like oppressed at all. So you realize like this has been generations of people that have lived like this, and that's just how life is, and it's wild how that has just seeped into their culture.
Yeah.
I'm
I mean, the
I'm
college thing is still a thing. It's a thing now,
yeah.
or a reason why people go in now.
I'm gonna pitch to the group. Think about this. Approach this movie from the position that it itself is a propaganda piece created within the universe.
Hmm.
So we're watching a propaganda movie from the United Federation Council, like the UFC, not the UFC, but the United Sky Marshal Deans was like, we need to drum up recruitment numbers. Let's roll out like a 1943 style military, like one of those World War II movies that were basically to sell war bonds. Let's do that to kind of drive up enlistment. So we'll get the prettiest, dumbest people in the world. They're going to talk about like what their goals are, what the benefits of becoming a citizen. We're not going to shy away from the fact that it's going to be tough, but we're going to follow people that have become heroes. And, I mean, the title of the second movie is Hero of the Federation. Like what better journey would you be to watch this, the most impossibly beautiful people on the world become like heroes and die tragically and, confess their love while they're gargling blood out of their mouth, that kind of shit that people have always eaten up in propaganda movies.
I think you're onto something. Like this is like the
Yeah.
John Wayne movies of the Tyrann Federation or whatever this is. Yeah.
Yeah, right down to the fact that Rico's like 20 years too old to be doing this job.
That's also true.
But no, that's bang on. And any
Mm.
propaganda angle to this movie is definitely deliberate. That's the thing. Because it's Paul Verhoeven, because he's a smarter guy, he's got a great sense of humor. He's got a great eye for, and ear for brain, mind for satire. Anything that feels like it's that feels silly, it's deliberately silly, and that propaganda angle, because there's plenty of, in the wrong hands, you could do that where a movie can come off as propaganda unintentionally, and that's one of the worst things. Like Rambo 2, for example, is a movie where it's like, a sequel to one of the great anti-war films, and the sequel is a very pro-war. I mean, it's too ridiculous to take silly, but if to take seriously. But you get it when you do that wrong, you wind up with something ridiculous, like a bad Michael Bay movie. But Paul Verhoeven does it in a way where he can give you something over the top, like this, and it can come off as it can come off as like darkly funny. It can also come off as slightly disturbing. If you want to look at it as in the more disturbing angles, like that's the great thing about Verhoeven's movies is you can. I think it's more fun to watch as like a satire of military propaganda, but that is what it is. It's absolutely. It's like I mean, I haven't heard Paul Verhoeven talk about the specifics, but he must have studied some propaganda films as to come up with the outline for and the tone of this movie.
Well, considering he was in the Netherlands during the Nazi occupation, I guarantee you he was exposed to some kind of that shit.
Mm-hmm.
But one of his big quotes is talking about if I tell the world that a right-wing fascist way of doing things doesn't work, no one will listen to me. So I'm going to make a perfect fascist world. Everything is beautiful. Everyone is beautiful. Everything is shiny. Everybody has big guns and fancy ships, but it's only good for killing fucking bugs. It's one of his many quotes about this movie. But I am 100% not surprised that the satire of this has fallen on deaf ears, and that it fell on deaf ears when the movie first came out. I think a lot of people just didn't get what he was going for, and I feel like it has had a negative effect on the careers of all of the actors involved that they were in this movie, because they look at this and like, oh, this is Casper Van Dien's biggest movie. Oh, he fucking sucks. Oh, Denise Richards, she's got the emotional complexity of a plate of milk, and I feel like
hey, she got to play a nuclear physicist 2 years later in a James Bond movie. So
Christmas only comes once a year, Jay.
Oh, I can't believe you dropped that one. Well, Dina Meyer had a whole career after this. She was in a couple of good Saw movies, even, and a lot of other stuff. I like her. She's been in a lot of good stuff. So,
Neil Patrick Harris.
Neil Patrick, he's probably had the longest career. Let's
not kid ourselves. Yeah. Neil Patrick Harris had to claw his way back from this movie. Being the drugged out version of himself in those Harold and Kumar movies. Yep. And that's what got him Barney, and that's what got him back into respectability.
And they tried to do that Gone Girl and got whacked by Rosamund Pike in one of the most disturbing fucking scenes you'll ever see on film.
And what's sad is Casper Van Dien tried to do that in that Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23 or whatever it was TV show. I
remember that. Yes.
And he was great in that, but it didn't catch on like How I Met Your Mother. It just was like for naught.
Yeah.
And, as we've talked about, I think the people who've worked the most out of this, that were the least harmed by this, were like Jake Busey and
Clancy Brown.
Dina Meyer. Well, Clancy Brown doesn't count because Clancy Brown just has to roll out of bed talking to a microphone, and they'll write him checks to be in every cartoon.
Yeah, him. Michael Ironside's just basically playing himself, again in these things.
Before. Can each of would you like to later in the podcast, one of us or all of us, do an impression of Michael Ironside saying Clendathu?
I think all of you should take a shot at that, because I didn't even try it in the plot summary. I knew better. I do want to say though that, and we haven't talked about it much here, but it is a lingering thread between RoboCop and this, is the news segments and stuff, because clearly Verhoeven was going to have and this is Edward Dumar too. It's like, let's talk about the way news covers war, and I remember the first Gulf War in 91, 92, along on that kind of stuff. And the way the news covered that, and then when I saw this movie a few years later, I was like, oh my God, they're just like ripping that off. Because
Mm-hmm.
it's this, let's present this really one-sided point of view, and then let's show enough spaghetti, but not too much that it freaks people out. I mean,
Mhm.
like there's a lot there though about war journalism and what does that mean and the way it gets presented, at least from the American point of view. And I don't know, I was really struck by it this time of like how well that worked as satire, but also as commentary.
It's called "We Learned Our Lesson from Vietnam," and we're only gonna let them show the things we want to show, like
Yeah.
handsome young recruits in their cool, handsome and pretty recruits in their battle armor, and these kids are ready to go out and eat bugs. And I guarantee you that news report got cut well before that dude got stabbed through the thorax.
Yeah. Well, and you even got like the little kids like, I'm doing my part and stomping the cockroaches on the
Mhm.
ground and all that. That felt very World War II. Like,
Yeah.
we're all in for the war effort. I'm not going to eat sugar this week so the troops can have some.
It's a
Yeah,
great way. It's such a great way of world building, and it's done perfectly in RoboCop because like RoboCop is a very great, but it's a very tiny, simple story. It feels so grand because of all the world building Paul Verhoeven does. What's interesting with Starship Troopers, it actually is a fairly big, epic film, and it just is made all more bigger and feels more realistic because of those news broadcasts and the propaganda bits like little adverts which are so well done and funny and so many of them involving children like that image of the guys they're passing out the guns and they're just handing out like 7.62 ammunition just live rounds to all these little kids like they're Skittles, which is hilarious.
But I mean, I feel like that's Paul Verhoeven talking about America. Like, here, you just
Oh
have a
yeah.
gun, I mean, that's part, and he's not entirely wrong in some places that would be that easy.
what's wild is we talked about the fascist leanings of this movie, and that's one of the things apparently Paul Verhoeven like leaned into when he cast like Casper Van Dien. She was like, "This guy's got that chiseled jaw that Lindsay talked about. He's got these beautiful blue eyes. He's got that incredible head of hair. We were 100% making this dude like the centerpiece of this movie, and he got this role over like Mark Wahlberg and Matt Damon and like A-list
Huh.
actors, like even back then, who were kind of bigger deals."
Hey, bro, I'm ready to squash some bugs, bro.
Ah,
Can you imagine Marky
Hey,
Mark in
bro,
this role?
you
I
got any you
can't.
got any racial slurs we could use on these bugs?
Huh.
I see, like, from a facial structure perspective, why he may have been in the running, but
Yeah.
I would still put Casper Van Dien above him. I
Yeah, I
can't
think
imagine him being in this movie. That's so funny.
Mm-mm.
see the thing about like Casper Van Dien is I'm not I think I don't think he's a very good actor in this. I think he works. It works, but I just don't think he's a very good actor. But by the same token, if they did get like Mark Wahlberg, who like around the time of Good Will Hunting, has always been a really strong actor, he'd be too good for the silliness of this movie. You kind of need a bad actor, a little. Maybe not to be too harsh to Casper Van Dien, but like if it was a
Mediocre actor.
mediocre. Like if you did this movie today, we don't. There aren't too many actors like that. Like this wouldn't work if it was Timothy Chalamet, if it was Tom Hardy, if it was, those guys like Christian Bale. Like it just wouldn't work. It just wouldn't and be the same. But Casper Van Dien works, and I think he was definitely picked because he definitely has a look. He has that. There's no other word for it. Very Aryan look. He looks like he did step out of a Nazi propaganda film from like 1939. Like if you put him in black and white with scratchy film stock, it would like there's well that's so much of this movie would fit a Nazi propaganda film right down to all the black and gray uniforms. But yeah, Casper Van Dien. It's like it's not a great performance, and yet somehow it it works. Like a lot of the cast, like
I-
it's like Denise Richards. That adds to the humor of it. Like it's Denise Richards again. This impossibly beautiful woman who's like really wants to be a fighter pilot. Again, it's like Top Gun does that, but it was like unintentionally silly in 1986. But this movie's doing it where it's like it's meant to be a joke, I think.
Talk about a 1, 2, 3 punch for Denise Richards, by the way. She had this, Wild Things, and The World Is Not Enough in consecutive years.
She had a couple. She actually has she actually has a lot of good movies to her name. Like she's in a really great movie. I don't know if any people know about it. It's called Tammy and the T-Rex.
Yeah.
I love that movie.
I don't know what I was expecting with that. That is a brilliantly hilarious film. And she was in Wild Things right after this, and Undercover Brother, and Drop Dead Gorgeous. And then she kind of, I don't know, she kind of walked away a little bit, but she had a really good stretch.
That was the problem.
That didn't help. Yeah.
Yeah. But she's not any good either. I just want to be clear on the record. Like if Casper Van Dien's a bad actor, so is she. But they both understand their assignment is I'm not supposed to be good. I'm supposed to be pretty. And they are exactly that. Like even when she's getting stabbed through the shoulder with an impossible shoulder wound and then walking around like it's no big deal later.
That's the best.
She sells that shit like any bad wrestler you can see today. Like, it's amazing. But that's what she's supposed to do. She's just supposed to be pretty.
Yeah. And she may not have been good, but she certainly wasn't bad.
No.
Like she was believable in her assignment.
I think she does exactly what Paul Verhoeven wanted her to do.
Yeah.
And I feel like that has been a shadow that has cast over the rest of her career.
Yeah.
I feel like her and Elizabeth Berkley probably get together once a month for like support pictures of mimosa or whatever.
Wow. That would be a duo right there. How have we not done Showgirls in the 15 years of this show, by the way? That might have to happen.
Have we really not?
We have not done Showgirls.
We talk about it.
We talk about it. We just haven't done it. So.
Jay, if we did Showgirls, we would immediately be canceled. There's no way you can even talk about that movie these days and not get canceled. And I'm not one of those people who sees like
I don't think it's true.
I'm not one of those people who sees cancel culture everywhere, but like that movie is so full of objectionable shit that like even if we tried to talk about it as nicely as possible and as politically correctly as we could, something's still gonna happen that's gonna be bad.
I don't know, man. Like for me, Elizabeth Berkley's acting career, peaked on Saved by the Bell when she got hooked on caffeine pills. So I mean,
she was so excited.
She was so excited. You're right.
And scared.
Yeah, but no, I mean they're asked to do what they're asked to do, which is to look pretty. And they both do it. Her and Casper Van Dien both look pretty. And then the movie has to hang on everybody else, which is what's amazing. And I want to give flowers to Dina Meyer, who not only looks amazing in this, but has to carry a lot of the narrative weight of what's going through in a ton of this movie. Like she has to keep Johnny centered. She has to do her own shit. She has to be cool. She has to be all the things. She has to be like great soldier, cool girlfriend, badass, leader, and then she has to be tragic death in this movie too. She has to do a lot of stuff.
She definitely stands out in the cast of like a lot of the actors are like kind of camp in an appropriate way. When watching it this last time, I'm like, man, if she was like another generation later, it's like she would have had like Charlize Theron's career. Like she should be playing like proper badasses. Like that. She should have been in. She should have been cast as Black Widow in the Avengers. Like all those kinds of parts. Like because I think she is very good in the movie. Yeah.
She plays a badass really well.
Oh yeah.
And if you like look at the boot camps that the actors went through to get prepared for this movie, she definitely is a badass because they went through they shot the movie in Wyoming, which is a bad idea, especially considering when you're in April in Wyoming, you're still in the middle of potential blizzard season. So like as they're like doing these 3 mile a day runs and learning how to handle weapons and sleeping in military tents and stuff, they get crushed by like 2 feet of snow during a blizzard. And like all these actors, all the main cast are just like huddled together around like fires in oil cans trying to stay warm. And like even Denise Richards, who wasn't involved in the infantry scenes and didn't have to do this, she was like, "No, I'll get involved with this. If they're going to have to do it, I should do it too." So fully to her credit, she volunteered for this same level of training, and they had famous military advisor slash actor Dale Dye,
Yeah, they'll die.
the retired Marine captain who has been an authority figure in every possible military show, and surprisingly wasn't like Sky Marshal Dye in this, because like he would have looked amazing in one of those costumes, but he was probably like, no, too close to Nazi, can't do it.
Yeah.
And he was the guy who like ran them through the boot camp, and yeah, it's incredible to think you did that much work for this movie, and everybody looked at you and said, "Oh, you're just lazy and goofy and bad at your job," and you suffered through some serious shit.
Hey, film strip fans and our friend Mike from Action for Everyone will know Dale Dye as Colonel McNeil from the 1990 action film Firebirds that Lindsay and I got to take part in, and where he was also a military advisor. So, and I can only think that if the movie was made 6 years before now, or whatever, we would have been seeing Nick Cage in one of these roles, for sure. So,
I mean, he was still young enough
something
here, but yeah.
yeah. I don't know, Carmen. I just want to be with you. Yeah.
Ew.
Yeah, it's very, yeah, right. It just, yeah, it wouldn't
It wouldn't have
work.
worked. It wouldn't have
Nah,
worked.
wouldn't be the same. But
It's amazing that Keanu wasn't in this.
I don't know how. At 97, where was he at this point? I don't know. I think,
No, he had already done Speed by this point.
yeah. So he was
I think
too
he was
big of
on
a
the other
deal.
side of that.
Yeah, he wasn't even good enough to do Speed 2, man. Like, they'd replace him with fucking Jamie Patrick. So,
Hey, to be fair, he took one look at the Speed 2 script. And he was like, "No."
hey, look, stay tuned is all I'm going to say to that. 'Cause I don't have any desire to talk about Speed necessarily, but I'll talk about Speed 2 all day. But because Willem Dafoe is doing a thing in that movie, and it's called cocaine, and we need to talk about it at some point. I can't prove that, but it looks like it. No, I mean that everybody here though, like no matter how cheesy, and I mean Jake Busey may be the cheesiest of all of these people. Like they at least understood the assignment, right? Because in the book, like it's all very straight laced. It's very serious. It's one of the commentaries from the book is like it's not even veiled fascism. It's straight up fascism in a lot of ways. But in the movie, they play it all for a joke, and he clearly understood what he was doing. Everybody else did too, and you just roll with it. And I mean, even down to like Clancy Brown just cracks me up in this movie, right? Because when Casper Van Dien's leading the squad, and again, Brubaker gets shot because he takes his helmet off in the live fire exercise or whatever, which is a great puppet, by the way, because the cut on that is amazing, but a great effect. And they're gonna whip Casper Van Dien, and he's like, "Bite down in the sun, it helps." I know, and the way he says "I know," it's just so like earnest. Like, oh, how many of these have you taken, Zim? Like a lot. It's the truth.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Clancy Brown. He does stands out. He would be my favorite performance and character in this movie. He is so much fun in this. Him and Michael Ironside, two guys who typically play villains. A lot. At least like Michael Ironside was. He was the heavy in Total Recall. Clancy Brown is the Kurgan, and in this movie, both of them get to stand out as heroic characters for a very rare. I mean, I can't think of another movie where Clancy Brown was a good guy, except for his very small role in Promising Young Woman.
Blue Steel, opposite Jamie Lee Curtis. I will offer you that someday. But yeah, so
for sure. Yeah. But he is very good. He gets I would say he gets the best line of the movie. That bit where the guy's saying, "Why are we practicing with knives anyway? With a nuke when we're all going to be in nuke fights? All you got to do is push a button." And throwing the knife into his hand, and he, turns to all the students, saying, "The enemy cannot push a button if you disable his hand," and rips the knife out and just calls for the medic. And that is one of the best like drill instructor moments in a movie, because he is so brutally violent. Again, part of the fascistic energy is like he doesn't just beat him up and yell at him. He like within first 30 seconds, he breaks that guy's arm in the fight to where like the bone is coming through and like you can see the blood is soaking through the sleeve of his sweater.
Yeah, but can we also talk about, like, again, that's part of the absurdity of all of this is they are fighting an enemy that does not have those kind of limbs and doesn't
Yeah.
operate on that level. But we're training as if we're fighting other humans. And I think that's part of the thing is that they completely underestimate what they're going against and they roll into that nest and they get absolutely whacked. Like 100,000 soldiers go down in one fight. And
Yeah, in the very opening invasion of Clendathu, they just get absolutely smoked. And that explains a lot about why when we see them getting reinforcements at the end of the movie, they all look like children.
yeah, they are
Yeah.
children. Yeah.
I Jay, I honestly never even considered the training for fighting humans when they're not fighting humans. Though in the book they do fight humanoid
Yeah.
creatures, I guess,
The
if we're thinking
arachnids
of
are,
it that way, but that's
yeah.
not covered here.
Yeah, they are a little more the humanoid side in the book. You're right,
Mhm.
and they don't do a great job of describing them from memory. But in this movie, they are not. I mean, they are straight up like I don't know, things that Godzilla would have to deal with in the legendary movies. Like that's what they look like.
Yeah, that's a great thing about this movie is the turn it takes when we get to Clendathu, because like the first chunk, like 45 minutes of the boot camp, there's that satirical nature to it, and it's a lot of fun, and it's over the top. But once the action kicks in, it's like they don't make the action comical. It's like when those bugs show up, it goes for just full on action horror straight out of James Cameron's Aliens. And that's the thing about Paul Verhoeven is like, he's really great with the sense of humor and all that, but when he clicks into action mode, he is absolutely one of the greatest action directors. The visceral thrill that guy gets with violence and gore is, I almost want to say it's neck and neck, him and James Cameron being the absolute best when it comes to just screen violence. And like within the first death in this movie is the news reporter getting bitten in half. His body lands in two pieces,
Mhm.
and then it's Rico getting kind of pierced in the leg. And every death and bit of violence in this movie is so over the top and is so horrific in a way that you can treat it as horrific, but with me with violence, it's so over the top. It's so horrific. It's funny at times. It's tough not to laugh. Maybe it's sort of it's a nervous laughter too, because it's not because it's so well done and it's just so horrific. Like when that training exercise, when that guy gets shot in the head, it's like the amount of blood on the ground. Earlier in the movie, they show what a colony looks like that's been attacked. There are so many like practical makeup effect corpses littering that place. So much blood, and that it is so horrifying. Even like watching it now, it's like I forgot how unbelievably graphic this is, and that's throughout the whole movie. And just Verhoeven is so good at that with he makes violence like it's all over RoboCop, with like making that violence as horrific as possible. That somehow that combines well with the jokes, and you wind up with that's what makes Verhoeven one of the greatest directors, is that combination of the laughs and absolute horror with the violence. It just gives you a combination that you just don't get with other directors.
Yeah, and let's talk about while we're talking about the action, let's talk about the second unit director, Vic Armstrong, who is one of the most prolific stunt coordinators, second unit director, stunt doubles that has ever existed in movies. Like, he was Harrison Ford's stunt double for the first three Indiana Jones films. He did the skiing for George Lazenby in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Jay. Uh,
Mhm.
Shout out, find that one in Double O Film Strip in the archives.
Yep. Our
He
buddy
was the
Andy.
stunt
Yep.
double for Christopher Reeve in Superman and Superman 2. He was involved in The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. He was involved with War of the Worlds. He did a lot of the action sequences on I Am Legend. He was the guy who did the opening scene in Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Speaking of excellent violent movies, um, he's one of those guys who's just been around forever and knows his stuff and absolutely puts together some of the most amazing like stunts, second unit direction stuff. He was involved in going all the way back to like Red Sonja, Total Recall. So he's got a history of working with Paul Verhoeven. Last Action Hero, Universal Soldier. He's done some serious stuff. And he is like one of the like go-to dudes for this sort of thing. And it shows because like the action, the set pieces on this movie, the action is immaculate, like chef's kiss.
Yeah, I want to say like for effects that are as old as they are, you know, in this movie, that it really holds up. Like it looks good. It's a good mix of early computer generated work, but a lot of models, a lot of practical stuff, especially the ground stuff. But even the spaceship stuff, like I've been reviewing these Star Trek movies with Nate, and sometimes those look great, and sometimes they look
Hmm.
like a fifth grader, put them together, And this movie like buries some of those TNG ones. Like they look really good. I was blown away by how well they held up.
That's the thing
It
about
is
this movie.
really well.
It does. It's like there's a lot of movies from the '90s that are like very visual effects heavy, where they just doesn't hold up. But there are so many shots in this movie with when the frame is just filled with hundreds of CGI bugs, and it looks as good as like it's like that CGI you get in the Lord of the Rings movies, where it's just there's just something about the work they put into it. It just holds up, and not just the practical effects, but the special effects, the bugs that because there's a great combination of like the practical bugs, bodies or close-ups on bugs that they shoot and all that, and the way they work that in with the gore. It's all so seamless. I think, and in that it comes down to Phil Tippett. I don't know if he completely designed the entire bug race in the film, but I know he was like chiefly involved with the special effects. He got an Oscar nomination for this movie because that's the thing about this movie is when I think of Starship Troopers, I think of it as a B movie, as a very fun, a kind of a camp cheesy B movie, but it cost $100 million. This was not a cheap B level production. This is like this. They spent Terminator 2 money on this, which is, of course, that's the tragedy of the movie did not do very well at the box office. It didn't make Terminator 2 money back, unfortunately, because of I haven't seen what the marketing looked like for this movie, but obviously they didn't do it right.
They had no idea what to do with this fucking movie.
No, they did. I remember that y'all. I'm serious. I saw the trailer and I was like, I don't know, it's kind of cool. And then the movie is not what the trailer sells you. You can go look it up now. I mean, it made $120 million in its worldwide. That was probably half of what they really spent on this thing, depending on from budget to marketing and all that kind of stuff. Like it, they did not know what to do with it. And it's wild because we've called out like all these people that are involved in it too. Basil Polidorus does the fucking soundtrack for this. And it's this amazing soundtrack, but it's just buried in this. It's an A movie that got sold as a B movie, and I don't think people knew how to react to it and what to do with it at the time. We just weren't. I mean, it's like Marty McFly said. You're not ready for it, but your kids are going to love it.
Yeah, and it's one of those movies that having rewatched it, it was chock full of people that I vaguely recognized. Like
Hmm.
I think this is the first time I've ever clocked that the blonde cadet who's sitting next to Carmen when she's learning to fly the plane is Amy Smart.
Yeah, like a
Uh-huh.
very young. Yeah.
And
Yep.
that the commanding officer of the military base where they're doing all their training, that's Dean Norris.
Yeah, I know.
Like-
Way before Breaking Bad, Dean Norris. Yeah.
Like this movie is loaded with holy shit, it's that guy or that girl.
So the people who had really tiny bit parts in this movie ended up doing pretty well.
That tends to, that's what's great about watching '90s movies, like specifically the '90s decade. Is like every time I watch a movie from the '90s or even like the very early 2000s, everyone is recognizable. It's like, what was that movie with Enemy of the State I watched for the first time, and
yeah.
it was
It's a
it was
loaded
strange.
cast.
I couldn't believe it. It was like every single character in that movie is played by a recognizable face in a way where it's like in Oppenheimer, they did that on purpose. But in Enemy of the State, it's like that was just luck of the draw. Everyone in that movie was charismatic and they found a way to have a decent career after. And,
That's Tony
yeah,
Scott, baby. Like he knew
big
how
time.
to find them. Like he could just get an ensemble together.
and And Dean Norris, it's great to see in this because he's like, that's a great thing about Verhoeven. He reuses that. He's got like a stable company of actors he reuses a lot. And like Michael Ironside was in Total Recall. And Dean Norris was also in Total Recall, playing the recipient of that line where he says, "You got a lot of nerve showing your face here, Hauser." It's like, look who's talking.
Yeah,
that bizarre mutated thing on his face.
I always felt like that guy was Pontu Babu from Star Wars, like his distant cousin or something like that. Like they kind of live in the same facial universe. But yeah. So.
Yeah, like even Rico's parents. Like Rico's dad was in Chud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rico's mom was in Missing in Action.
Yes, I knew that face. Yes,
That's where you know that face.
And the captain on the ship, Brenda Strong, was she was in Star Trek and a bunch of other stuff.
Brenda Strong,
Desperate Housewives,
Twin Peaks. She's been in everything.
Yeah, I knew that face. It's like you've either been in a horror movie I've seen or a bunch of other shit. There was a bunch of other shit. But she'd been in a lot of stuff. So I thought she might have been in
even like the
Hellraiser
Sky
movie.
Marshals, like that they show briefly, are both like you were in a bunch of stuff. Like it's crazy.
But to Kurt's point, and you're right, Kurt, that's one of the fun things about the 90s is everybody was somebody. And they all went on to do a thing, and they're still working today. And you're like, oh, wow. And I don't know who that is today, y'all. Like, really. Like, I look around these movies today, and I'm like, I don't know who any of these people are, and I don't think I'm going to know them in 10 years. Like, they don't last,
It's too spread out across. There's so many more movies and big time with TV shows. Like they're not all those kinds of people don't all get funneled into the same. Like there's only 30 movies that get made a year or whatever. It's like it's too spread out. So yeah, there's no way to test that out until like 20 years from now. But it's like you don't get that watching. You don't get that watching movies from 2010 unless the cast is already stocked with actors who are good at famous at the time.
I'll tell you a modern movie that's had a little bit of that is Top Gun Mavericks, like a sporting cast, like Glenn Powell, Monica Barbaro, Bill Paxton's kid, you're starting to see people like show up now. You're like, okay, these people are going to do things because they have charisma. Like you see them and you're like, oh yeah, they got presence. Like Tom and Christopher McQuarrie picked these people out. Like they knew what they were doing. So
big time.
Yeah, you can see that, but there's not many of those. It's been that may be the one movie I can think of where I've seen that from a cast.
All right, but we get through our initial invasion of Klendathu, where the military gets wiped out, but we find out that Rico, who did not die, to steal a line from Muppet Christmas Carol and also the actual Christmas Carol, is rescued by Raschak, his former high school teacher. And after he recovers in the back of the tank, getting his leg vagina sewn up, he, Dizzy, and Ace, because they're the three people who survived, get to join Raskat's Roughnecks. And that leads us to our second battle, where we meet the big tanker bug on Tango Urilla, where Rico does his crazy cowboy act, and where Casper Van Dien really hurt himself badly riding on the back of that giant thing because they had apparently there was some sort of device he was riding on, and like chipped a tooth and bruised some ribs and got just beat all the shit cowboying on top of that monster.
But
that's a great monster. So that's a proper like Star Wars kind of action scene, and it's so well done with that. Like the effects on that beetle are fantastic. It's a great image of like the beetle's big enough where it's like any other movie, like that would be enough. It's the fact that it's huge, but no, this thing has it has this nuclear flamethrower on its as its antenna. That's not just flames; it's like flames that melt your bones, like a dragon. The second it hits you, that great image of the woman who gets her entire arm just falls off as soon as the flame hits, which is brutal. But that image of Rico shooting down at the shell, and you see the practical, the shell blowing apart with the the day-glow orange blood and tossing the grenade in. If it was like any other, if a movie did that today, that sequence would be the best action scene of the movie. I just said, about the kind of the negative. That's how crappy a lot of sci-fi action movies are today. But that's a great bug scene for sure.
It's very much out of Empire Strikes Back when
Oh
Luke
yeah,
attaches himself to the AT-AT and cuts open and throws the grenade in and drops out and
yeah,
just walks away, and then all of a sudden it blows up and just falls over. Like the same thing happens. I'm like, they're ripping that off, but it works. Like as homage, it works because it is a great idea. Like Johnny gets on top of that thing because he's practiced that. They did that move in one of the practice scenes, and it goes all the way back to the football scene. They're just replaying the hits. And he's like, I'm gonna blow a hole in this thing and throw a fucking grenade in it because it's a great idea. Because him shooting it does nothing to the bug except piss it off. Like it doesn't even notice it, and because those rounds aren't doing anything but breaking the shell. But when he throws that, and we should say like it's a bigger deal in the book that like all those grenades they're throwing are like very low yield nuclear devices. Like they're throwing
yeah.
nukes around like it's candy. So everybody's getting irradiated. They don't know it, or maybe they got a pill for that in this day or something. But that's what's
Let's
wild. But I was watching these. My wife's like, these explosions are elaborate. I was like, it's because they're all low yield nukes, and they make a big
Yeah.
deal about it in the book. That
Well,
they,
Ace and
yeah,
Rico are routinely shooting nukes down bug holes
yeah,
on
yeah,
Tango Urilla and on Klendathu.
yeah, yeah.
And what's funny is, Jay, you expect any of these people to live long enough to get cancer from hanging out with all these radiation. Like, none of these people are expected to live.
They are fodder.
Nope.
You are correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
And
I think that's Verhoeven again. You're making that same point about like we sell this dream to these people about you can get this great reward, but you're also mostly just cannon fodder. And it's wild to think about.
yeah, and that leads us into the reward for being successful in the military is you get an increase in rank and also more difficult duties. So, and pretty much it seems like immediately after getting back from Tango Urilla, they get dropped onto Planet P again to rescue the base that has been ravaged by the arachnids. That's where they run into the general, the great cowardly general, who
Who,
is like,
by the way, the gym teacher from Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
oh, that's where I saw that guy.
That that
Okay,
face,
Jay.
sir. Yeah, that's who he is.
And
He'll make
Quado
you.
from Total Recall.
Yes, yes.
Whoa,
Yep.
nice, man. Wow, that's awesome. This movie's just chock full of that dudes, and
Yes.
I couldn't recognize him, but man, that's
I
incredible.
knew that face immediately. I was like, "Oh, let's go run the gym, coach." Like, that's what that dude looked like. But no, you're right. Like that, but that's when we also get a new bit about the bugs that like they're sucking the brains out for some reason. So like for some reason it becomes the relic monster, for a minute. They're like trying to figure out why, and then we'll learn why later when Patrick Muldoon becomes a scanner, briefly for a second there. But that's how they're learning us is that they're literally sucking our brains out. And I'm like, okay, I mean, I can go for that as a sci-fi throwaway.
The only problem. It works great. It's a great idea. The only thing is, I would have loved to have seen how that is actually done because they imply that the antenna, they jam the antenna into someone and make him and brainwash him into calling for backup in order to just send more troops to get killed. I would have loved to have seen that because that is a great villain concept of a completely inhuman creature that cannot even communicate, but that shows incredible intelligence that that it would even think of doing something like that.
I felt like that was out of Independence Day when they threw Data up on the wall and was like,
Yeah.
"No peace," to Bill Pullman or whatever. And I think I said Bill Paxton's kid earlier. I meant Bill Pullman's kid in Top Gun. But either way, but I mean, like I felt like that was the same idea, right? Because when they spike Patrick Muldoon, he tells it to fuck off. He's going to kill it anyway or whatever, and they just sucks it out. Like you hear like there's something else going on where all the other bugs are real excited because apparently they're psychic too, and that brain bug is like going like this guy was a pilot and now he knows these things, and we have the plans to the Death Star now or whatever. So I was like I felt like that was their Rogue One moment for the bugs.
Yeah, it's definitely established that there's some sort of a hive mind situation, where the brain bug is the one determining what the other bugs are doing, which is why they have, while we see them develop, having air support for their ground operations later on. And combined arms with blasting the ships out of orbit and then jumping on the dropships when they land. Like the bugs are established to have learned something about human tactics, and become a more dangerous opponent because they are able to just literally drink the brains out of people who know things.
Yeah. And going back to the effects, practical and otherwise, the bug goo and the brain bug in general, the brain bug is so icky. And when it like takes its little stabby tongue out to suck the brains out, like all the goo and the snot spit, bug grossness that comes, like everything about that. And from in the early scene when they're dissecting the bug, all of the goop that they've made for it is just so for me evoked a very visceral reaction. Again, I was eating during one of those scenes, so not a great move on my part, but it was great though, and it did age well, and it's really it really adds a lot to the scene to just see all the, I don't even know what else to call it besides
all the
goo.
viscera.
Yeah.
The gore effects in this movie were done by, I can't remember their names, but they've done a lot of stuff before and after this. They did Nightmare, the effects for Nightmare on Elm Street. I think it was 3 and 4. They did. I know they did Sleepy Hollow right after this. So so they handle all the bug stuff and the blood. And when you look at Starship Troopers, and you look at Sleepy Hollow, you can tell it's the same guys doing the blood in that. And that
The blood's good. The blood's good.
Oh yeah, the blood, both of it. Like I love how it's kind of like it's cartoonishly bright, the insect blood, of how bright and green and like almost like a kids movie level of, like Nickelodeon slime, contrasting with how unbelievably realistic the red blood is in the.
And this is 97, so Nickelodeon slime was at peak slimeage at that point.
Big time, yeah.
It's true, yeah. Peak slimeage is a great way to say that. Yeah.
And that brain bug really is, like, the more I watch the movie, I'm like, that is one of the best creatures ever designed for a movie. Because I can't tell, even watching it, I can't tell. I know the face of it is 100% real. So I can't tell if the body is CGI and it's like a real face. But whatever that is, the illusion of that creature is like, because it is so huge. And with the spider-like eyes and all the pulsating, the mouth and the sharp tentacle of it is such a disgusting and frightening creature that is so perfectly alien, like in that way of like the titular alien and Alien, like something so inhuman that like you take one look at it, you couldn't reason with this thing. It's so inhuman. There's no emotion in there's nothing. It's such a perfect kind of faceless monster, and it gives you one of the greatest. And Paul Verhoeven has so many great death scenes in his movies, and it is definitely one of the greatest and one of the most disturbing is Patrick Muldoon getting his brain sucked out, because as I understand it, there are no pain sensors in the brain. So I don't know how painful it is, but you can see how uncomfortable he is having his brain sucked out. He really sells that well, of like, you can feel like there's something very wrong about that sensation, and capping that off with him being completely replaced with a puppet corpse of his entire head, kind of caving in because the brain bug is done sucking out the brains and starts sucking out whatever's left in the head. It is so gruesome, and it's such a perfect sci-fi death.
It travels that line perfectly between funny and gruesome.
Oh yeah.
Just like the puppet of his like emptied head could be really funny. But when you watch it as it plays out, it becomes horrifying because it just perfectly walks that line between like, oh, this is silly, and like, oh, this is the most horrifying idea I've ever seen in a movie. It's wonderful. Yeah. And one of the things that struck me, since we're talking about how great the special effects are, is how well the storming of the compound on Planet P looks.
Yeah.
Like, you would think of just a big field of CGI nothingness would not age well. but it still looks really good.
It really does. It whatever one might think of Avatar 2. I mean, the effects are great in that, and I would say that the effects in that particular sequence in Starship Troopers, which is again a big kind of usually kiss of death for CGI. Full daylight, super bright, with 100% CGI creatures. I'm even saying it. I don't know how they made it look so good in 1997, but they did, and it is a great action set piece with all the violence in between. I always think of that guy. He tries to jump away off of a ledge, and he gets stopped. And the actor is being kind of caught and pierced in the claws going through his chest. That's a perfect special effect there.
Kurt, same year we saw the Anaconda movie where they tried to do that shit when the Anaconda caught people out of midair, and it didn't look nearly as good.
No.
And I mean, like, but you know what? Like, I don't know if y'all caught it or not. That whole like battle sequence that's going up against the when they're all getting attacked stuff, that's like the Alamo. Again, they're in that really short. I don't know if you've ever been to the real Alamo in San Antonio, but what will strike you about that is how friggin' small that area is. And just what that would have felt like to have all that shit coming down on you at that time. And that's what's going on here. Like they're in a confined space that's supposed to be fortified, but when the enemy can come from underneath and all through you and everything, you are not fortified. Now you're trapped, and that sucks. And that to me was one of the more brilliant parts of the way that all played out, was that they thought they were in their home space and they could defend it, and they couldn't. They were completely trapped by their own device.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a neat inversion of the Assault on Precinct 13 kind of setup. Which is in and of itself, it's the Rio Bravo setup, which is where Carpenter got it. So, but yeah, it's a great use of the thing that is supposed to protect you. The walls become the thing that keeps you trapped in with the monster once that big thing bursts out of the ground and eats off Lieutenant Radchak's legs. Which leads to one of the first of the two big losses of the movie, where Rico, you know what to do. Michael Ironside says it in that great voice, and then Rico puts a bullet in his chest because he's not going to live with no lower torso. And then, of course, that sets up the second death of the movie, the saddest death of the movie. Hats off, flags at half-mast for the late, great Dizzy Flores.
Yeah. Great quarterback, cut down under prime.
R.I.P. to the Pat Tillman of the Starship Troopers universe.
I mean, like, I remember when I first saw this movie, I thought, I could tell, I was like, there's gonna be a lot of deaths. Like, I wonder who else is gonna make it out of here. I was pretty sure that Denise Richards wasn't going to get killed, because you don't kill the really pretty people, and you don't kill Casper Van Dien because he's the main person. So it's like, okay, who else is going to go? Well, we can whack Jake Busey. Who gives a shit about him? He lives, amazingly. I knew Ironside was dead meat. Either him or Clancy Brown. I was like, no, I'm putting money on Ironside. He's going down, because he makes such a big deal about, if it was me, I'd expect y'all to do the same, because he shoots a soldier earlier. I'm like, oh yeah, he's getting shot by his own people, probably Casper Van Dien, which he does. But I didn't see Dizzy going out. Like, I thought she was going to live in some way, and the fact that she dies by horror movie conventions, y'all. Like, she is alive and safe until she screws Johnny, and then the next day she's dead. I'm like, that's some bullshit right there, man. I thought we were breaking stereotypes. It still bothers me. Dizzy should have lived, damn it.
It's just an effective way of making sure there were no little Ricos running around in the sequels.
I mean, you have to have a license to have a kid. I figure, like, you got to have a license to, like, turn them on or something too, man. Like, that's how I feel like that was going on.
But yeah, it's a great death scene, because the movie, like Michael Ironside's death, it's so over the top, such like a warrior's death. I also love that it's awesome. He loses his arms. Michael Ironside loses his arms in Total Recall, loses his legs in Starship Troopers. It's just a shame he didn't make another Paul Verhoeven movie to see whatever the hell could have happened to him in by the end of that movie. But like, that death is it's over the top in a good kind of sci-fi way. But with Dizzy's death, it goes against the grain. It's the only death in the movie they really do play for any kind of emotion. It's not over the top, like it's not Saving Private Ryan, but they really do play it as heartfelt. It's like one of the only heartfelt moments in the movie. And it does stand out. Clearly, they did not think this would get a sequel or any kind of franchise, because I do remember, I was watching it going, there is no way in hell you would kill that character if you ever, if this was going to be a franchise, because it is such a great character. And it's one of the best performances in the movie. But on the other hand, it's a great shock, because that is definitely a character that you would never think would die. And, the way they do it, it leads, they don't really do too much with it, but it creates a good place for Rico to go. The idea that, she represents his soul, his heart, and the idea that he loses that and becomes more of a real hard ass militaristic type guy in the third act, which if the movie was longer, they could have done some more with that kind of an arc.
Well, I mean, but even in his arc, when you see him at the end, he's just parroting what he got trained to do.
Yeah.
Come on, apes, you want to live forever? That's what people say to him. But there's something to be said about that. Is like you get so brainwashed is the wrong term, but it's the only one I can think of right now. You get so washed into the culture of it. Yeah, indoctrinated. Thank you, Ron. Indoctrinated into you just become the thing that trains you. You don't have any recourse otherwise. And it's like the last bit of him that's hanging on to, because we didn't talk about, like, Buenos Aires is wiped off the earth. Like that hometown's gone. He's got nobody to go home to. Him and Carmen are not, even though she makes this big deal about, I don't know, like this High School Musical shit where like the three of them together, everything's going to be okay. That didn't pay off at all. But he's just like this total hardened shell of himself at the end of this. It's just a different warrior. I mean, he is a warrior at the end of it. But before he was just playing along and kind of getting by on charm, but now he's really on his own for the first time ever.
What's wild is we watch Rico become that hardened warrior in real time. What we don't see is what turns Carl into the kind of guy who's willing to sacrifice hundreds of thousands of people,
right?
Just to see, including his best friends, just to see if there might be a brain bug on Planet P or not.
That's true. Carl went like full SS. He had the uniform. He was real weird. And he was so normal at the beginning of the movie. He was just normal, everyday, psychic, middle-class kid.
That's what the agency does to you, Lindsay.
It kind of makes you wonder what kind of shit they put Carl through as part of his indoctrination process. Like, we've seen how bad it has been for Rico. How bad must it have been to turn Carl into that? SS Carl, Overfear Carl.
I mean, spoiler alert, Carmen and Johnny are the only two people in the book that make it to the end. They like catch up and talk about like, oh, did you hear about Carl? Yeah, I heard he got killed on da 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 da. Like, they just talk about all their friends that are dead. Like, there's no romantic connection. They're just buddies, they're friends from school. But they talk about like, oh, Carl's dead. Everybody's dead except Johnny and Carmen, who they know each other because they went to school together, but they don't like know each. They're not friends. They stay in touch, So it's different. But I'm with you. I'm like, man, that dude became like a completely different version of the X-Files by the end of this movie. And he's playing it that way too. That's the thing. It's like, I don't know what they told Neil Patrick Harris to do, but it's like, go out there and act like Ted Bundy. I mean, because that's what he's doing. It's really weird. And when he puts his hand on the thing, I was like, are you a faith healer now? Because that was what that touch looked like.
Yeah, watch these Benny Hinn tapes.
Yes, exactly. Just don't jump up and down as much. I mean, that's what's going on.
It was the trench coat, the costuming. I mean, he really did play into it, but the costumes were...
The boots.
Yeah.
The fact that he has
with that coat,
boots on.
You're right, Liz. That was very SS. Like, I hadn't thought about that. But yeah. But the way he even talks, too, it's like, yes, I thought there might be one here. He's doing his best Shatner, at the end of this. It's very Bill at the end of this.
And they were like, let's nuke it. Let's nuke the whole planet. And he was like, no, we're not. We have more to do.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yep. So Carl, who's now everyone's commanding officer because he's a colonel, and as Kurt pointed out, he's the youngest colonel that's ever coloneled.
Lived. Yeah.
Probably the youngest colonel since the Revolutionary War. Has decided that he sent the Roughnecks were sent into the trap deliberately to confirm the existence of the brain bug. And now that they know that the brain bug is there, they're going to go back onto the planet P, where they just got their asses kicked before, except now they're going to take everybody with them. And it's going to be a full-on hunt and search and destroy, but don't destroy, capture mission to find the brain bug. And as the battle starts off, they just drop off like all those ships full of people. But then Carmen's ship gets hit. The Roger Young gets hit by arachnid poop, the flaming arachnid poop, and they have to get on the most ridiculous looking escape pod that has ever been in a movie.
that is, yeah.
It's like they got to run down the Running Man. They got to run down to the set of the Running Man and get the little thing that shoots Arnold Schwarzenegger into the Running Man.
Gillian, I'll be back with some bug poop. No, you're right. And, it is.
But... And then Carl's like, only in reruns, pal. It's a bug.
Exactly. But it works still. I mean, it does work. I mean, I remember thinking at one time, I'm like, is this movie too small because it's just this same group of people that keep getting in all the same shit? You know, but I'm like, no, like I actually think it kind of works better because, like I said, the book, it doesn't do this. So you only have that one character, and it would be very hard to just live through. I mean, this movie is Johnny Rico's movie, but it's hard to just live through him. And all these other people make it interesting to go on the journey with. So I'm glad that it's a little too convenient that everybody's together, but it also kind of fits the motif too. It's the same 5 kids from the high school at Bayside that do everything in Saved by the Bell. You know,
but I also feel like maybe Carl is pulling a few more strings than he lets on.
That's a good point.
The fact that he just keeps coincidentally showing up at these things, and as we've established later in the movie, he's clearly got a psychic connection to pilot Rico around like a meat suit, telling him where to go to rescue Carmen.
Something tells me that's not a deep conversation to have to overtake in that brain.
But that escape pod moment always stands out for me as a particularly nightmarish moment. Just the idea of getting into an escape pod, and it doesn't land on the surface. It pierces the surface and lands you right in the nest. And it's really well done, and really, as someone who is kind of arachnophobic, it is a proper nightmare moment of climb out of the escape pod and in come all of these bugs and the brain bugs, and they do all the horrible stuff you would think that they would do to you. And again, the entrance of the brain bug, which I love that it's a great image of the thing is so heavy and fat and immobile that it's being carried by all these little smaller so I don't know which beetle bugs.
Yeah, it is. The first appearance is as repulsive as the first time you see the Predator without his mask on.
Yeah,
like, it's that horrifying to me. Mm-hmm. But like, if the Predator like had a head cold and was super snotty.
Yeah, why is this lump of bugs so terrifying? It really is just like
it's all the eyes.
Yeah.
And the sticky gooiness of it. It's like, I remember they used to talk about like some of the monsters of the week on Buffy, and when they didn't think they were scary enough, they're like, add more goo. And they were, I mean, that tended to work. Like, more goo just makes people repulse,
When in doubt, add more goo.
Yeah, exactly. And there was plenty of goo to go around in that thing. It was yeah.
Yeah, they raided the Double Dare storage closets for all the extra goo they could find.
Oh my
God. No doubt about that. Yeah.
Yeah, we get her and Xander. They crash into that underground tunnel and are captured by the arachnids. But before they can suck out Xander's brain, we see him take Chekhov's knife out of the escape pod and slide it into his boot, and then kind of palm it over to Denise Richards, who looks like she's never held a knife in her life.
Nope. I still contend that was probably a stunt arm that did the cut. That she knew it. But it's it's what you want in this kind of movie, right? Like that's the Return of the Jedi. Leia's got the gun, and she's gonna blow away the stormtroopers at the door of Forest Moon.
What's weird is she looks more comfortable with the gun than she does the knife.
Well, I was gonna say, I think she went through the training.
Does,
Like,
yeah.
Because
like
when we see her shooting the gun, she doesn't have her eyes closed and she's not flinching.
yeah.
Like you see a lot of people with their eyes closed or like a squint. It's hard to tell with Jake Busey because his eyes always kind of look like that. But everyone else, you can kind of see Casper Van Dien occasionally squint or flinch a little bit, but she doesn't. So good for her.
I particularly like Patrick Muldoon's his final line of because it's a strange kind of a plot where we don't see the end of this war. So but I love his line of just saying to this bug, someday someone like me is gonna kill you and your whole fucking race. Which is, it also stood out to me watching it this last time. I think that is the only F-bomb in a movie that is so hard R graphic, full of objectionable visual material. There is almost no swearing. Like RoboCop and Total Recall are just, nonstop F-bombs, but for like Starship Troopers as just the one almost makes me think naively, did Paul Verhoeven think this movie had a chance in hell of getting a PG-13 because they only have one F-bomb. Maybe that's what Americans object to.
Can you imagine going before the NBAA with this and going, we would like the PG-13? And all they did was get to the shower scene. They're like, are you fucking crazy? Wow. Yeah. That's a good idea, though, Kurt. I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. There's not a lot of language in this movie.
Yeah, yes, American censor board. I do not understand what is wrong with the breasts. Would it make a movie get PG-13 if I show the penis?
Jake Busey's like, I volunteer as tribute.
Yeah.
That man had
What
no
if I
shame.
take pants off now, movie board?
Ron, did you practice that accent?
Yeah.
No, that's why it's just completely terrible.
It's just natural.
I don't know what European country he's supposed to be from, but apparently this is like Paul Verhoeven after he's been hit in the head with a hammer.
But I mean, you're right about one thing though, Kurt, and we hadn't talked about it, is that we don't see an end. Like this movie just stops, but the story doesn't end. Like, and maybe it was because they thought they were setting something up, and they ultimately were, as we know. But like, not any people involved in this, they were going to, any of the makers at least, were going to go forward with this. But the story's just gonna kind of like it's going to continue, but you're not part of it anymore. Like, how do y'all feel about that? That it's like we don't really resolve anything here.
Well, it's like war never ends. There's always the next war. So and if you're life military, like you're just always going to the next one. So this just felt like a little snippet in the lives of some people who decided to go career.
It is like it is a war movie ending as opposed to a typical action movie ending. Like every other action movie, that ends with the villains are defeated and they all lived happily ever after. And then it adds to the black comedy of this is nobody lives happily ever after in this movie. And the war again, there's no way that there's no way they're going to probably win this war if it's an insect race. Who knows what they're going to do? But it's a great kind of war because like I've seen every other World War II movie. I've never seen anyone that ends with the war ending. That's just a war movie staple, I think.
I mean, it reminded me a lot. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this 1987 movie called Hamburger Hill that was made about an assault in Vietnam or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a movie that it ends, but it also ends with and the point was, and there wasn't one. It was just, it was exactly what it was described as. It was just this, which, I mean, going back, Kurt, think about like To Pass of Glory, like the anthill, and all that kind of stuff, and just how pointless that ultimately was. But it mattered to somebody in some boardroom somewhere. And so you just keep doing it. And so I thought it was neat. I actually, at the time, thought it was a genius way of ending this because you didn't do that at the time. Like you had to have a movie that had an ending. And this movie just stops more than it ends.
Mm-hmm.
Did anyone feel bad for the bugs at any point?
I did. Glad you mentioned that. Even as a kid, I noticed that you don't ever see the bugs on Earth. It's all humans invading these alien worlds again with the Nazi angle of the fascist angle of attacking all these other countries to the point where watching this movie this last time, I was like, you never actually see the bugs hurl an asteroid, and it made me think. There's nothing that it really suggests this in the movie, but I just like the fan theory of that asteroid was engineered by humans in an effort to mobilize the military, just because they want a war to, I don't know, stimulate the economy or whatever it is that the military does for the world, to give them something to do.
Kurt, I love how you've created like the Buenos Aires version of loose change in the Starship Troopers universe to make this happen. But I mean, really though, but you're right though. You think back early on, they talk about like we have to watch out for the bug planet because they've got these endless asteroids that they could come and get us with. But up until that point, they haven't until we attack them, and then they wipe out Buenos Aires. So that's a good point.
Well, Kurt, you mentioned when he talks about someone's going to come by and kill your whole fucking race.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of killing your race chatter,
Oh, yeah.
which is like, that's never been good in the history
No.
of the world. And I didn't feel bad for them because, again, I too am not a huge fan of arachnids myself. So I'm fine with it. Keep killing them. But at the end, when the brain bug was brought out in like the net, and our friend Neil Patrick Harris, very intuitively decides that it's scared. No one else could have figured that out. But
No.
like in that moment, like it did look scared. They made this giant monstrosity look scared, and I felt so bad for it. I was like, you guys were attacking it. I don't know. What else was it supposed to do? It didn't know. And I found myself feeling bad for these weird, gross things. I don't like that.
I felt really bad for the bug when they finally start to test it, and they bring out the big bug speculum thing and the dentist drill to drill into the side of it for reasons. Like, what are you going to learn from just poking a hole in the side of it? That it bleeds and doesn't like to be stabbed with things.
They do that to cows.
Who could have guessed?
And the big censored logo that appears right as they insert it, which is hilarious and genius. The idea of it using your imagination to be like, because like, what did that do? Did that create blood? Like, or whatever it did, it was enough that whoever was making this propaganda film thought, everything you've seen, this is still too much. And talking about that. Again, definitely a Nazi angle of not wanting. There's no desire whatsoever to make peace with these bugs or leave them alone or live in harmony. It is an effort to wipe them out. And again, it's like a flip of Avatar. It's like if this was Avatar, the humans in that movie are the bad guys, the ones that want to kill the aliens to get their resources. In this, our heroes are the ones in gray and black military going around to other people's planets to wipe them out, and also with apparently no resources, just a completely pointless slaughtering for the purposes of. It would be a great way to sell guns and make money off all the technology that you're going to be producing to fund just to keep this endless war going. But again, it's that's a whole thing with Paul Verhoeven, being born in 1938 in Amsterdam and seeing this is a guy who has actually seen the Nazis firsthand in World War II. He said that the film Hope and Glory, which I haven't seen, I think it's about London during the Blitz. And he said that film is my childhood. It's like, that's what I went through. So anything in his movies, in RoboCop, Total Recall, or Starship Troopers, that might make you think, almost get like a Nazi vibe from this, that is not an accident. And Starship Troopers he goes all the way. He's never gone. That's as far as he's ever gone with the Nazi angle.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the let's exterminate all of them was like things that Paul Verhoeven probably overheard from occupiers in his neighborhood.
Definitely.
Talking about like people that he knows. Like he definitely has an axe to grind against fascism, which is probably a good idea.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting that the reception of this movie has gotten over the years, and how many people just either blatantly missed it or deliberately ignored all of the fact that, hey, these are the humans, but they're not necessarily good guys. They're doing some terrible stuff and provoking a war that probably isn't needed. Because, like we've established, we've seen them throw the rocks and shoot the butt lasers or whatever, and it was never like offensively. It was always after, like, they don't shoot the rock at Buenos Aires until they're already clearly in a war with humanity. So
Mhm.
you know who who's the aggressor really it's kind of up for grabs. You're supposed to like not feel for the bugs, but also like Paul Verhoeven kind of makes you feel for the bugs.
Well, it's the same idea of who's pulling the strings behind the curtain, who's the Phantom
Hmm.
Menace, if you will, and all of this stuff, and I think what he's asking you to do is to go, usually the heroes in these are us, right? Well, what if you're the aggressor?
Hmm.
But we're playing it the same way we always do. But if you look and realize, like, you're the one poking the bear, like, I mean, like anything, you're gonna any creature will defend itself when attacked, and that's what the bugs are doing, and I think that's what Verhoeven is commenting on. Is, hey, what if you think you're the good guy, but what if you're not? And that's part
Yeah,
of the
Yeah.
legacy of this movie too.
yeah. That's the whole thing with this movie is it definitely has the vibe of uh, World War II movies that are typically made in Europe. There are no pro-Nazi films, but it has that ring of movies that depict just what the working life was of the German military, like a movie like Das Boot or it's not World War II, but like All Quiet on the Western Front, the German army, and that, like a view from the oppressive side, and trying to find the humanity within that. It's a great way. It's a great place to tell a story. And Paul Verhoeven, he did that here. He just happened to make it as a blockbuster. Entertaining thrill ride, which again is like, and saying again, as I'm saying that, it's like I don't know if I'm surprised or not that this movie didn't click well with the American public. Because on one hand, I'm like, I can't believe people didn't flock to the theaters to see this. Just the CGI of it alone, I can't believe everyone didn't go to see this. But then I'm like, maybe it's the darkness of the satire and the political messages or jokes that just went over their head, whatever that is. That maybe just didn't help. Maybe I often wonder, it's like if this movie would do better today just as is, if a movie like this would just because they would market it properly to, like, if you they would know how to market it as you would market it with that whole would you like to know more, like they would market it with that style probably, and it would definitely be a bigger hit. um but again, it is a shame that because like ask people today, like I've never heard anyone have anything but nice things to say about this film today. Like it's found its audience today, but in '97, I guess they just the audience just wasn't there. Even it made $100 million. It just wasn't a hit because it cost $100 million, so it was a wash.
But it apparently has been good enough and remained positive enough in the cultural view to have all these sequels and
Hmm.
offshoots and animated films and things. And then also, apparently, they're going to do a reboot with Neil Blomkamp.
Well, that's the first I'm hearing of it, and that's a great idea. But it's one of 50 great sounding Neil Blomkamp reboots that he keeps getting attached to, because
Yes,
that's perfect. That's a perfect thing for him to do. I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah,
right.
we'll see when it happens. But it's fairly recently been announced. Like a couple months ago, they said that he was going to do it. Um, and it was going to be a closer to Heinlein adaptation of Starship Troopers, so less of this and more of the jumpsuits and
Hmm.
and uh, fighting against aliens that are humanoid with weapons. So it's going to be it's going to be a same wrapper, different sandwich kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. I'd be curious to see how that played, because again, having read that book recently and then what you would adapt out of it and into this would be a very different tale. Like I don't think you would, I think it's a wise idea to not try to go for the humor and the satire mix because that doesn't work. It's one of the things that the people that remade RoboCop got right. It's like we can't recreate that magic, so let's not try. It's just also one of the reasons that movie didn't work for a lot of folks because they went in expecting that. So I'll be curious to see how people would respond to it. And I think you're into something, Kurt. It's all in how they sell it to us. Like what
Mhm.
are you selling us exactly? So, but that's an interesting aside to see if they get that off the ground.
So I think we're all pretty much in agreement that this movie is kind of become a cult classic over the years. Um, but there's still probably a little bit that's left to be said as we come to everyone's favorite part of the show, our final thoughts, recommendations, and our popcorn ratings. Kurt, what do you have to say for Starship Troopers?
Well, I've loved this movie since I was 9 years old. This is the movie where it's like I loved it as a kid, and every time I would revisit, loved it as a teenager, loved it when I was in college, and I love it as an adult. There's not a whole lot of movies that can stick with me like that, except for a lot of the best films ever made. And I think it's a kind of movie that you're starting to get a little bit more of now, but it's a kind of movie that they didn't make for a long time, which is a very well made by a great director, big budget, R rated sci-fi action movie on a scale like this. They did do that with whether you like them or not. They did that with the Matrix films. They did that with Blade Runner 2049, and they did it with Alien Romulus, but that's a very short list. They did that with that kind of a scale with Avatar 1 and 2, but those are PG-13. Uh, I particularly love Avatar 2. I'm always thinking, man, if this was rated R, this would be a proper masterpiece, but that's a different story. But Starship Troopers was Paul Verhoeven's last hurrah as far as making what I think are the best sci-fi movies of his day that weren't made by James Cameron and Steven Spielberg. I think it works as a brutal, sly satire of military propaganda. If you want to delve into the darkness of this movie, it's all there. But if you don't care about that, as is the case with RoboCop and Total Recall, even without the deep messages, it's just a kick-ass action flick. It's very funny with an air about it, like the whole thing is an inside joke, where even the serious parts, a lot of the deaths are still funny. Stellar special effects, be they practical or CGI, that hold up, as we've said, remarkably well for a movie made in 1997. I think the whole thing is just a spectacular sci-fi epic that, again, they've only started making again recently. Like, it's a different ball of wax, but a movie like Dune 2 comes to mind of that kind of a huge sci-fi action film. It doesn't have the heart and soul of movies like RoboCop and Verhoeven's Total Recall. Those movies really are a bit deeper, but that doesn't keep Starship Troopers from being just a damn entertaining film. I think it is absolutely on par with RoboCop and Total Recall, and it is another classic film by the massively underrated director Paul Verhoeven, and it gets an extra large popcorn from me.
Great. Jay, what do you have to say?
This is one of those movies that every time I revisit it, I ask myself, why don't I watch this more often? Because there's so much here. Like Kirk said, you can watch it for all the satire and the commentary. You can just watch it for the action and get a real kick out of it, or even the humor. It's not the best acted thing ever made, no, but it doesn't need to be either to work. It just works on its own level. And it's such a smart and deftly made movie that it doesn't waste any time. It's a little over 2 hours long. I mean, it flies by. Like you don't realize, how quick it is. And again, it holds up tremendously. So I'm with Kurt. I think this is one of those that I'm glad it's found its audience down the line, that people appreciate it for what it is now. And it's definitely one worth revisiting if you haven't watched it recently. And I'm ultra curious to see what somebody like Neil Blomkamp or anybody else could do with this if they wanted to go back to it. But yeah, this is extra large popcorn territory for me as well. It's a really, really solid movie.
Lindsey, what do you think?
I agree with pretty much everything you guys said. I don't have a whole lot to add. I'm a huge sucker for really good practical effects, for CGI that ages well. This has both of those things. I hadn't seen this movie for 25-ish years until recently when I rewatched it for this show. And I forgot how good it was and how much I liked it. That said, it doesn't go into extra large popcorn territory for me. I would absolutely watch it again. I should watch it more. And I think if I watched it with more regularity, I would probably assign it a higher rating. But I'm going to give it a really good medium popcorn with butter and salt. I absolutely recommend it to anybody who wants to watch it. It wouldn't be in like my everyday rotation, but I like it. I enjoy it. Will watch it again in another 1 to 25 years. So have at it. Ron, what about you?
Well, as someone who tried to get this on the podcast for years, if I didn't give it an extra large popcorn, I'd be pretty disappointed with myself. So I'm going to give it an extra large popcorn. There's not much I can add that hasn't already been mentioned by you three. But man, I just love this movie. It's one of those movies that I can turn on at any point, sit down, and just be completely happy with what I'm seeing. Like, I can turn it on. It's like, oh, I caught it in the beginning. Great. Oh, I caught it in the last, 35 minutes when their Father Gabriel from The Walking Dead / Deaton from Teen Wolf is like gone full Vietnam vet, crazy eyes, which shout out to him because he's great in this movie in a pretty thankless role, in a pretty small role where he doesn't get to do a lot of the fun stuff, but he gets to be kind of he's the animal mother of Rad's Cat's Roughnecks, if that makes sense to steal a comparison. But yeah, extra large popcorn. Love this movie. Glad we got to talk about it. I'm glad for a movie that is, like you said, just a little bit about 2 hours, just a little pinch over 2 hours long. It flies. There's a lot to discuss. If you really want to get into the weeds and look at it as like a take on fascism or a take on propaganda, or a take on the military industrial complex, all that stuff's there. If you want to watch bugs get blown up real good and Clancy Brown stab Jake Busey and Michael Ironside do Michael Ironside things with that cool voice, it's also there for you in that way. So like, if you want to watch this movie with your brain, it will reward you. If you want to watch this movie without your brain, it will reward you. Much like a emptied out husk of a skull. You don't need a brain to enjoy this, but if you do have a brain, it helps. So yeah, extra large popcorn for me. And that will take us to the close of our show. You can find more about us and follow us on social media at Filmstrip Pod on all the things where we share announcements about upcoming shows, as well as other fun content. Don't forget to subscribe and share the show with your friends or your enemies. I don't care. Bonus points if you leave us a positive review, as it helps other people find our podcast and it makes us feel really good about ourselves. Would you like to know more? Check us on social media and you can learn more. Until next time, thank you for listening to Filmstrip.
Thank you for listening to Filmstrip. You can find more episodes on our website, filmstrippodcast.com. The Filmstrip theme music is produced and performed by Frozen Lake 121. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.